Welcome to the Rest Factor podcast. In this episode, Dr. Michael Grandner, licensed clinical psychologist, director of the Sleep and Health Research Program at the University of Arizona, and one of the world's leading sleep experts, shared a masterclass on understanding and improving sleep. We covered his journey into behavioral sleep medicine, the science behind cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, and how sleep impacts metabolism, mental health, and longevity. He also tackled hot-button topics like the pitfalls of sleep tracking, the truth about supplements and biohacks, and whether some people really need less sleep. This conversation blends cutting-edge science with practical strategies, reframing sleep as a vital investment in performance, resilience, and overall health. You won't want to miss it. Welcome to the Rest Factor. I'm your host, Anna Marie Schick. On today's show, we have Dr. Michael Grandner.
Thank you for that awesome introduction.
Absolutely. How did your journey into behavioral sleep medicine begin, and what led you to make sleep a central focus of your career?
I have a bit of an unusual story because most people tell a story about how they got into healthcare and then had a sleep patient or something. Where me, I got interested in this because I used to love the study of dreams. That was my first love in sleep. And I would read all about them, and that's how I learned about sort of sleep science when I was in high school and in college. And I didn't realize that it was like a career direction, but I had a friend of mine who was all excited because she got a job as a tech at the new sleep lab that had opened up on campus. My response was, wait, we have a sleep lab that opened up on campus? How did I not know this? And it was new, just started. And she said, yeah. And you know, the guy who's running it, he's going to be teaching an undergraduate course next year in sleep. You should totally take that. Sounds right up your alley. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. And so, that's how it started. And then I took Michael Perlis's undergraduate sleep course at the University of Rochester. And anybody who knows that, he's like, this was however many years ago this was, now he has an international reputation as being one of the best teachers in the sleep field. And I was just lucky to be there and got really excited. Sitting through the course, it felt more like I was remembering than learning. I felt like this is where I belong in this story. This cast of characters, the story of the sleep and circadian field from the beginning. I felt like this was a story that I belonged in. And so I volunteered to work in the lab, turned into an independent study, turned into an honors thesis, turned into you should apply to PhD programs, and just sort of went from there.
Phenomenal. Your research highlights sleep's impacts on metabolism, mental health, longevity. How can everyday people prioritize sleep to improve those areas?
Yeah, it's tough given the society that we're in because, we live in a society that sees sleep often as an unproductive use of time. And it's not. It's actually a good investment in time. So thinking of it as an investment versus a cost could be helpful. But I think more helpful is thinking of sleep as your commute to tomorrow, where like if you are trying to get to work, you don't think, all right, let me do everything I need to do around the house. Let me do all of the chores. Let me do everything, pay all my bills. And then as soon as I'm done, I'll hit the road, make it to work, and hope I get there on time. It doesn't work that way. You have to think backwards. You have to think, what time do I need to get there? How long is it going to take me to get there? How long does it take me to get ready? How much time do I need to buffer in? When do I need to wake up so that I'm ready in time to leave for work on time so I'm not late? So you have to think a few steps back. A question about how to prioritize sleep in a daily life that's too busy with stuff, asking for time is really a hard thing to do. If anything, I'd like to say, let me give you some more time. Maybe the reason why you feel like you don't have time is because you're a little more stretched thin because your brain isn't getting the rest that it needs. Instead, think, what time do I want to wake up tomorrow? Okay. How much sleep do I need? Count backwards. How much time do I need to buffer into the night to allow for normal time to fall asleep, time where I might be awake during the night, or anything like that, or any awakenings? Let me budget that time in. All right, how long does it usually take me to fall asleep? What time do I need to be in bed so that I start falling asleep the time I need to get the sleep I need to wake up at the time that I want? And so then when do I need to start winding down? And what does that mean for me so that I'm ready when the time comes? And this is all about thinking a few steps ahead. And it's not so much about prioritizing sleep so much as it is making room for something that's going to make room for itself anyway. So, when people are only sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, yes, they feel like they're getting more time in the day. But if you actually look at the data, they're not accomplishing any more. If anything, they're often accomplishing less at the end of the day, because whatever they're doing it slower. They're making more errors, and they're chasing more dead ends because they're not thinking as well. They're not operating as well. They're not as healthy as they were. So that's my best advice. Rather than try and find an hour in the day to sleep more or whatever, it's think backwards and plan your sleep like you would plan a commute. How much time is it going to take you to get to the other side of the night? And when do you need to get into bed to be ready for that?
I promise you, I will borrow that line. Think of sleep as your commute to work. It is as basic as that. We wouldn't be chronically late to work because we know we wouldn't keep our jobs. We wouldn't be chronically late to class because we're going to suffer the repercussions. So that's, I love that concept. What is your take on the argument that some people need less sleep? Is this sufficient? Is this scientifically valid, or is this kind of convenient fluff?
I don't know. Some people need less sleep. Some people are tall. Some people have red hair. Some people are blind. Some people have excellent hearing. Like some people some people anything. You can put anything at the end of that sentence and it be true. The question isn't do some people, it's do you. So when someone says, well, is it true that some people get by just fine on less sleep? I say, yeah, there's some people who can get by on, maybe 700-800 calories a day or sometimes even less and not die. Are you one of them? You can experiment and find out. But the thing about sleep is often two things. First of all, yes, I'm sure there are people, there's a distribution of all kinds of things. There's some people who probably need more sleep, some people who probably need less. I would predict that many of the people who say that they need less, I believe them when they say they want less. But the word need, and I hate to nitpick as a scientist here, but I want to draw listeners' attention to this concept of need because it's a tricky word. It's a simple word. Everyone knows what it means, but you apply it in different ways. How much sleep do I need to not die is different than how much sleep do I need to maintain a generally okay level of functioning within normal parameters, which is different from how much sleep do I need for optimal functioning.
Yeah.
But we say the word need for all of them. And so when people say, I think I need less sleep, what they mean is I can have less sleep and have catastrophic things not seem to occur. That doesn't mean that that getting more won't be helpful either in terms of their goals. I mean, so first of all, need for what? The other thing is just because someone has a couple drinks and gets behind the wheel and doesn't crash their car and does it again and does it again, doesn't mean they're safe to drive either. Just because catastrophic and negative things don't happen doesn't mean that they can't happen. It also doesn't mean that they're going to either. So this is the tough thing. If I wish we had a blood test that says this is how much sleep you need for minimal level of functioning where you don't have to worry about your safety or whatever. Here's the amount of sleep you need to be okay, but maybe not optimal. And if you get this amount of sleep, this is optimal for you. And if you get over this is maybe too much, and then you'll be oversleeping and you might feel worse. I wish there were a blood test that says this, but there isn't. And unfortunately, asking people also doesn't work because you can take extremely sleep-deprived people, ask them how they're doing. They think they're doing just fine. They have no clue how impaired they are. You test them, you can see the impairments. They don't see it. Maybe because they've gotten used to it. Maybe because one of the impairments due to sleep loss is your ability to self-detect how impaired you are. So asking
like a
people,
functional alcoholic.
Exactly. So just because people feel fine, that also doesn't make me feel better. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people getting 5-6 hours of sleep that are functioning fine enough. Like, is that optimal for them? Maybe not. But if they were going to get up to 7 hours, what would the cost of that be? And would that cost be worth the benefit? So everyone's sort of got this sweet spot of you're not at enough risk for it to be meaningful. Does it mean you need to sleep more? Like if you're getting 6 hours of sleep, you should be getting more. It's like, no, maybe more might be helpful, but I don't know that for you. So the way to tell, because we don't have this blood test and because I can't just ask you, we have to start looking for things like corroborating evidence. Like, do you have other risk factors that are associated? Do you have trouble? I mean, the most obvious one, like if you were sitting quietly, like if you were going to the movies or whatever, and it was a boring movie in the middle of the afternoon, would you struggle to keep your eyes open? The answer is yes. Then maybe, depending on what time of day, maybe this is sort of your natural dip. But if that happens a lot of different times, then maybe you're too sleepy. Like maybe you need to bring it. Maybe that's your threshold. Maybe it's just some people, every time they sit down, they can't stay awake. They're really sleepy. So sleepiness, sleep propensity, your ability to fall asleep kind of anytime and quickly, that's actually a sign of sleep deprivation because it means you're starving. But it's not the only sign. I mean, you could look at things like your health. You could look at things like your ability to focus and juggle things, if you feel clear-headed or not. And if you have a question of, well, is this really about sleep or not? Well, do an experiment. As a scientist, I'm a big believer in experiments. When you don't know the answer to the question, gather data. And if you think you will have a hypothesis, is more sleep actually going to help me? You can talk yourself in or out of any answer. You can say, well, I think it will because, or like, no, it won't because. Actually, look to me, I would say gather some data. Spend a week at what you're doing, track a bunch of outcomes that actually matter to you, whatever they happen to be, change your sleep, track, rate those same things, see if the numbers change. If the numbers didn't change, you now have some evidence of where you're at.
Is a week a valid time frame?
Ideal world, I would give 2 weeks. Like in research, we usually track people for 2 weeks before we make a big change, but usually people aren't that patient. And usually you need a minimum of a week because what happens in a week is you get weekends and you get weekdays. You get good days, you get bad days. And most people, you take it a week, within a week, you'll have at least enough data in there to at least know what you're working with. But, more data can be more helpful and better. But yeah, I would say experiment. I'm not saying that everyone needs 7 or 8 hours to function. Or I'm not even saying everyone needs 7 or 8 hours to be healthy. What I'm saying is people who are sleeping 7 to 8 hours are much more likely to not have problems functioning and not have problems with their health that would have existed if they were sleeping less. Hopefully that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. CBT-I, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. What is it, and like what are the key components of it that are effective?
Yeah, so CBT-I, the thing about CBT-I is it's different from other CBT therapies. So you can Google CBT, you can learn all about, it's a whole domain of therapies, or CBT for depression, anxiety, and PTSD, and all these sorts of conditions. CBT-I is actually fundamentally different from almost all of them in that the concept of CBT-I, though it shares this framework that it's not about your feelings that drive your behavior, which drive how you think. It's that thoughts, feelings, behavior, and your physiology, they're all sort of intertwined with each other. That, even if you want to change what you're thinking and change how you're feeling or change what your body's doing, sometimes the way in is actually changing your behavior, and it feeds into the system. And CBT-I is a little bit different in that there's very specific techniques around this, because what it's doing is not only is there a cognitive component in terms of helping people manage, the stress and the stress about not sleeping a little bit better, but there's specific behavioral techniques that are different from behavioral techniques in other domains because they're specifically tied to essentially hacking your sleep, wake, and circadian rhythms. Where I don't mean hacking in a bad way, but you're essentially trying to. So I say it's not like that kind of psychotherapy. It's actually a lot more like physical therapy. It's you're getting your body to do a thing that it physically has the ability to do, but it needs to be built up. And there's exercises and there's ways to build it up to create the scaffolding that you want it to hold. And then you pull that scaffolding away. In other therapies, they do this in different ways. In CBT-I, essentially what it does is it helps reprogram and retrain your brain to sleep when you want it to, so that you're able to gain that degree of control and not feel out of control. And so in terms of the core components you're asking, so CBT-I has a few core components. The unique ones are on the behavioral side. There's the cognitive element, which has to do with dealing with beliefs and attitudes about sleep, because a lot of people don't realize it's that our own attitudes about sleep end up backfiring and creating the stress. Yeah. But so there's the cognitive component, but the behavioral component is where it's unique. And so one element of that is called stimulus control. What stimulus control is, so it's easy to explain. It's a little more complicated in practice, but the simple explanation of stimulus control is if there's a place and that place and that situation is predictably tied to a certain set of conditions, just being in that place will bring out those conditions in you, even without any kind of stimulation, any kind of push. They'll just come out on their own because they're going to expect it to happen. And if there is a place where there is nothing predictable, where the predictable thing is not going to happen, there is no predictable thing, then there is no thing that will happen all on its own. And that's the concept of stimulus control. So how does that apply? So a great example that I love to use, because everyone knows what I'm talking about, is the stereotypical going to the dentist. And my friend who's a dentist hates every time I use this analogy, but you know what I mean. It's a metaphorical going to the dentist, where you're there and you're already antsy, but nothing's happened yet. You're responding to stimuli that haven't even occurred yet. The response is coming before the stimulus. Right. You're there because you're predicting what's going to happen. You're prepping yourself for it. You're putting yourself in the mental and physical state. A positive one is going to the gym, where like even if you're kind of tired, you can make it through a workout if once you start, because you don't do anything else there. Especially if you don't check your phone the whole time and watch TV you can get in that zone really easily, because the range, the scope of predictable outcomes is narrow. So just being there provokes it. But if say you eat dinner at the dinner table, but then you also work at the dinner table and watch TV at the or like your desk. People are a big culprit of this, like eating at your desk and doing personal stuff at your desk in between breaks for work. And then you sit down to your desk and it's hard to get in that zone for work because your brain goes to these other things because it's not super predictable. So the way this works in CBT-I is if I say bed, sleep, bed, sleep, bed, sleep, bed, sleep, I say bed, you say
sleep.
Right. You want them to be predictably tied together. You want to teach that they're predictably tied. Mm-hmm. And if I said bed, sleep, bed, wake, bed, wake, bed, sleep, bed, wake, bed, sleep, bed, wake, bed, sleep, bed, what comes next? You have no idea.
Right.
When sleep can occur in bed, but it's unpredictable. If it becomes unpredictable, that's where you start running into problems. What's worse is thinking and worrying becomes self-reinforcing. So bed, sleep, bed, wake, bed, sleep, bed, wake starts becoming more bed, wake, bed, wake, bed, wake, bed, wake, bed, sleep, bed, wake, bed, wake, bed, wake, bed, sleep, bed, wake, bed, wake, bed, sleep, bed. What do you think is going to happen next? Probably wake. Mm-hmm. It may not be, but probably wake starts becoming predictable.
Wow.
So you act by trying to force it. No one got to sleep faster by trying harder. By being in bed when you were physically unable to be sleeping. This is where some of those dysfunctional beliefs and attitudes come in. I just got to try harder. Actually putting yourself in that situation made it worse. It actually dialed up the part you don't want. And so what stimulus control in therapy is, it's about decoupling the bed with wake and recoupling the bed with sleep, forcing them to be predictable with each other, whether or not they want to be, forcing them together. If sleep is occurring, you're in bed. If you're in bed, sleep better be coming soon, or else you don't get it. You don't stay in bed, and you force them together. Again, it's easier to describe that, it's easy to say, well, when you're in bed and you can't fall asleep, get up. Well, sometimes it's a little more complicated for people, but that's the broad brushstrokes of it. And that's why it works. It actually is extremely powerful as a learning tool to reprogram that connection. The other has to do with restriction of the sleep opportunity window, restriction of time in bed. Not necessarily restriction of sleep, but the thing is, similarly, when people are spending too much time in bed awake, it creates, it dilutes that effect. It creates this activation in bed. And so if, for example, someone's capable of sleeping 6 hours, but they're taking 9 hours to get it, you say something like, all right, you're spending all this time in bed, but you're only spending this much time asleep. Let's trim out the fat of all this time in bed. You're going to be awake anyway, and just make the time in bed. Let's squeeze and add some more pressure on that. Drive up your natural sleep pressure a little bit. It's sort of like, if someone doesn't want to eat their vegetables, and they need to eat 10 they want to eat 10 pieces of broccoli. How many can you eat? 2. But I want 10. Give me 10. Well, you're not going to eat 10, but I want the whole 10. It's like, no, you could only eat 2. Let me give you 2. And then can you eat that? It's like, okay, but then I'll still be hungry. I want more stuff. Like, okay, tomorrow I'll give you 3. See if you can eat that. And you slowly increase their sleep opportunity. Again, it's a little more complicated than this, but the point is you're aligning their opportunity with what they can actually do, set them up for successes. Even if at first you do end up squeezing things a little bit, that pressure, it's just that little bit of extra pressure helps overcome whatever mental activation there is. And there's algorithms for it of exactly what time they get up, exactly. And there's a lot of science around this, but at the core, those are the main behavioral components. It's adjusting their time in bed to better align with what their natural abilities are, and then grow it from there. And also limiting the time in bed awake, but maximizing the time in bed asleep.
Do you mean not doing things in bed other than sleep and intimacy?
Yeah.
Or do you mean when you're in bed intending to sleep and you're not sleeping, change what you're doing?
Yes. Yes to both, though it's important to remember the enemy of sleep is effort. If you're exerting effort, a little bit of effort might be fine, if it's just enough. But if you start exerting real amounts of effort to get to sleep, you're adding energy in instead of taking energy out. And then your frustration starts building. And then when sleep becomes predictably stressful, that predictable stress becomes the activation that keeps you awake. It's self-perpetuating. And trying to calm yourself down when you've programmed yourself to be awake just leads to frustration. And then eventually you might fall asleep, but it was after a battle. And the battle starts becoming predictable. It's going to happen. And then getting into bed starts making you stress that you're going to face this battle. And then you're facing the battle before it even started. Because of that, because unlike the dentist's office, if you're activated and stressed, the dentist can still do their job just fine. But if you're activated and stressed because you programmed the bed to be the stressful place, it makes it harder to sleep. So if you have that level of activation, if you're physically unable to fall asleep, get up. A great line that I have to attribute to my colleague Lindsay Shaw, who's a great sleep person and sports psychophysiologist, where the line I learned from her, and I use this in clinic all the time: sleep is not something you do. Sleep is something that happens to you when the situation allows for it. If you can do something that makes the situation allow for sleep, go right ahead. Turn off the lights, take a deep breath, whatever. But if there's something that is outside of your control, if you're awake because your mind's just kind of racing and you can't do anything about that, if that's outside of your control, fighting it isn't going to help. Sleep isn't going to happen. you're just going to add more stress into the situation rather than remove the stress. I mean, if anything, at that point, take a break. I mean, if you sit down to eat and you're not hungry, sitting there staring at your food for an hour isn't going to make you hungry. It's just going to make mealtime stressful. And if you do it over and over and over again, you're going to develop eating problems, even if you didn't have them before. That's how most chronic insomnia develops. Something causes you to be awake at night. And the best thing to do in the short term when something causes you to be awake at night is nothing. Nothing. Do nothing, change nothing. It's just like, let the system correct itself. But overcorrecting, sometimes creates this problem. It's sort of like if you're sick for a few days and you have no appetite, you don't have the thought, what if I starve to death? You don't think, what if I develop a nutritional deficiency? Because I've been drinking nothing but like tea and toast for 2 days because my stomach's upset or something. No, nobody worries about nutritional deficiencies or death by starvation from a couple of days of not eating when your stomach is upset. This is your body's way of telling you, you know what? Hold off this for now. We'll take care of it later. We'll get back to stability later. Right now, I need you to keep things out of my stomach right now. Same thing with sleep. When we're under periods of high stress, evolution figured this out a long time ago. Like if you can't keep food down, it's like if you can't keep sleep down because it's just, if you're running from the bear in the woods, don't lay down and go to sleep. If you're in the middle of some sort of important crisis, yeah, fine. Stay up for a little bit. Your body will correct itself later. Go back to your normal schedule as quickly as possible, and it should correct itself. It's the overcorrecting. It's the I need to make up for it by extra, and then what if I don't, and the worry and the stress about it. That's what ends up causing the problem.
But that's assuming that strategies are being implemented to change it, right? Because more of the same is going to produce the same. So,
right. Well, it assumes that your sleep was generally okay to start. If you have eating issues and your appetite's dysregulated, don't go back to your eating issues. But the point is that a temporary disruption, the system is built in to self-correct. Let it self-correct. If you have a stressful week, stressful couple of days, I deal with athletes all the time. And the night before a competition, if they're not sleeping, I say, that's fine. If you were sleeping super soundly, I'd be a little worried about your level of overconfidence here. I mean, so the trick is keep your sleep as good as possible up till that point to build some resilience in. And it's just like going a day, where you're not eating very much isn't gonna kill your metabolism or do any kind of, you're not going to get starvation from a day or so of fasting if you've been eating pretty normally. And, unless you're like underweight and not eating, then fasting will be worse. But start from a place of strength and you build resilience into the system. And then you won't worry so much about a night lost. And then that worry won't keep you up even more. So it becomes these cycles.
Do you feel like these measuring devices, wearable or non-wearable, as practical as they may seem in the research, in the clinical setting, they're giving us great information, but do you feel like our current, in my opinion, obsession with sleep tracking and optimization might be backfiring? Does it potentially increase
in some
anxiety?
People it could be. The point is the information helpful? Usually people ask, first question, is the information true? But that's actually not the first question. The first question is it helpful? And we'll get to the true. But the helpful is, if it gives you a number, what is that number? Is that a useful number? So this is the thing. If you're using a sleep tracker to change your behavior, that's like using a bathroom scale to change your weight. It's a measurement tool. It's a valuable measurement tool. And it's hard to find a weight loss program that has no measurement scale in it. But a bathroom scale is not a weight loss program. And that's a great metaphor that I attribute to another colleague, Amy Athey, who came up with this as a sports psychologist, where as we were developing sleep health promotion programs, this is how she was sort of explaining this to the athletes of like, look, a bathroom scale is not a weight loss program. Similarly, a wrist tracking device is not a sleep promotion program. It's just information. What you do with the information is key. the first thing to do with the information is to know how accurate it is. And then once you know the accuracy piece, you realize that's actually a very loaded question, because accurate relative to what? Where when it says how much sleep I got, is that correct? Well, correct by what metric? How do you know what is correct? So for example, if I hooked you up to brainwaves, would it agree? If I asked you to record the night, would it agree? The truth is, for most people, a lot of those things generally line up, but the brainwave activity will pick up a lot more awakening during the night than a person will by memory, because we have a lot more awakenings during the night than we remember. It's just what we have. Humans, like all mammals, don't sleep in one big chunk. We just might remember it as one or two big chunks. And so the more of an objective measure you have, the more you'll pick up all that stuff that you don't remember. So on average, a wearable might say, if I asked you how much you slept, you might say 7 hours. But your wearable device might say 6.5. The EEG device might say 6 hours and 15, 20 minutes. Which one is correct? Well, I mean, the EEG is probably closer to the biology, but me asking you the question is probably closer to what correlates with how you feel. And if you're using this to feel better and function better, this is what people don't understand. Objective measures of sleep don't predict all of the outcomes that people think they do. The subjective sleep actually sometimes predicts outcomes better, especially around insomnia, where insomnia is not about how long did it take you to fall asleep. Insomnia is about how long did it feel like it took you to fall asleep. And that's actually important. And because what we could measure physiologically are echoes of what sleep is biologically. So where sleep exists in the brain, we can't measure that directly in humans. What we measure are things that are way downstream of it one way or the other. We can get those things to agree with each other pretty well, but there's things going on that we don't have the technology to measure. And so the wearable devices are great to give us a picture, but we can't rely on them as 100% of the relevant data, because there's lots of assumptions in there that may or may not be true. For some people, it may be more accurate versus less accurate. They might give you the information you need to address your question, or it might give you information that's unhelpful to addressing your question. It's also and I'll tell you, what these devices are best at is, on a minute-to-minute basis, were you probably physiologically awake or physiologically asleep, whatever you remember or don't. Yeah. And they will get that correct with about 90-ish% accuracy, maybe a little over 90-ish% accuracy. What that means, though, in an 8-hour night, they can be wrong 40 of those minutes. They can be wrong for 40 minutes out of an 8-hour night and still be over 90% accurate. So first of all, and that's what they're best at. The sleep stages data are okay. They're ballpark. Do not use one night data to make any strong decisions. It doesn't replace clinic data. It's measuring what a guess of sleep stages are. If sleep stages aren't what you want them to be, it probably doesn't matter too much, to be honest. It's interesting information, but not terribly useful. And the heart rate data are probably good from the devices. But any other metric you see that says something like recovery or readiness or whatever, or sleep score or whatever, unless that company has published data that tested these things and can tell you what they mean, as a scientist, to me, it's not quite made up numbers. It's probably a very educated guess. It's probably not nothing, but unless I know how to interpret those numbers and what they actually mean, I don't pay attention to them. So I don't pay attention to things like sleep score or readiness score or anything like that. I just don't, because that's not information that I think I can use. I look into how much sleep does it think I got, and is it within generally normal limits? What does the night generally look at? Were there a lot of interruptions that I may or may not remember? I thought I had a rough night. Let me take a look. Did it see that? No. Well, it doesn't mean it wasn't true. But maybe it didn't pick it up, or maybe it picked up a lot of stuff that I don't remember. Maybe I just slept through it. Like, it's a piece of information. Right. It's not all the information. So right. Don't rely on it. Don't treat it as if it's made of gold, because it's not. It's just guesses built on guesses that are useful and helpful, but they're still just a piece of information.
Yeah. I guess in the end, you want it to help you gain insight on your own metrics to improve or to get you to take actionable steps to improve. That's what one would hope.
And if you notice some of these scores changing based on what you do, then that could be useful. You could say, look, I notice every time I drink alcohol, my readiness score drops. Does that mean you're less ready? Who knows? But it means that you're seeing the biological effect that you may not have known was there. So like tracking changes in these metrics, even if we don't know exactly what they're measuring, if you can track changes in them, that could be useful. Sorry to interrupt, but I didn't want to throw them all under the bus. Like they're not nothing. It's just it's hard to know what they mean, and they're not super actionable on their own.
Yeah. Well, and I think just in general, if we were to throw them all in one bucket, I can't even, if I had $1 for every time I ask someone, well, what do you do for your sleep? Oh, well, I wear X, Y, Z.
How does it put you to sleep? I don't know that.
How does that help you sleep? That's not what you do for your sleep. That may be how you measure yourself. But again, like you equate it to the bathroom scale.
Is not a weight loss program.
That's right. That's right. So let's pivot here towards the end on supplements. And I know that's a loaded question that we could spend an entire hour or more on. But these, biohacks and sleep supplements, do you find them to be more kind of fads, trends that are obscuring behavioral changes?
Yeah, but the thing is, with what people need to realize about supplements is supplements aren't secret medications that somehow the FDA missed. Like if magnesium was an effective treatment for insomnia, you could patent it as a treatment for insomnia and make a whole bunch of money on that IP and sell it as a pill as an active ingredient. You'd make a lot more money than selling it as a supplement. For example, there's a difference between supplements and treatments. Supplement is like coaching, where treatment is like therapy. Supplement is like going to a personal trainer, versus treatment would be like going to a physical therapist or an orthopedist, where it doesn't mean that supplements don't have a value or a use. They just have a different value or use than treatments. They're not in competition with each other. They're different things. No one would go to their personal trainer for a broken arm. You need a cast from an orthopedic surgeon. No personal trainer in their right mind is going to treat you. And you're not going to go to a physical therapist if you want to figure out what a better workout routine is. I mean, you can, but that's not a good use of their time. Actually, that's what a personal trainer is for. Or like, am I doing these squats right? That's what a personal trainer is for. And it's a different question. What supplements are for, they are not there to fix sleep problems. From the FDA's perspective, it's what they call structure and function claims, which is they can take whatever's there and help promote health. But it's not going to fix a problem. And if you look at the data, that's sort of how it bears out. So you have a number of supplements out there that do impact on sleep. A lot of things do. Where, for example, some of the, melatonin is a whole other can of worms, where melatonin isn't a sedative. Melatonin is a clock shifting, and it's its own thing. It does help, and it works really well for what it does, but it doesn't do what it doesn't do. But just looking at the other supplements, looking at the things like the magnesium and the L-theanine and the others, and the glycine GABA. and the other stuff that's on the market. What was another one you mentioned?
GABA.
Oh, GABA is a whole other thing. I'm annoyed with GABA. So GABA is like, you put that in a supplement, and I feel like it's often very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very deceptively marketed, to the point of you're either ignorant or unethical. It's a big deal. So GABA is a neurotransmitter in the brain that is extremely powerful. That turns the volume down on all kinds of stuff. The reason why Ambien works is because it boosts GABA levels. The reason why alcohol makes you sleepy and uncoordinated and slur your speech is because it boosts GABA levels. The reason why Xanax zonks you out is because it boosts GABA levels. Like, GABA is extremely powerful neurotransmitter in the brain. And if you could just take it to get those effects, first of all, what the heck do we need all these controlled substances for?
Right.
And second of all, why isn't it a controlled substance? If GABA can, and this is overdosing on sleeping pills and overdosing on sedatives is highly dangerous. Why can people just take GABA over the counter? The reason is because it doesn't do anything in the brain. Because if you take it, the reason why we need these molecules that are in pharmaceutical grade sedatives, which could be very dangerous because of the boosting GABA, because artificially boosting GABA can be dangerous. It slows your heart rate, it slows your breathing, it slows your coordination, it slows your brain function. This is why they're controlled substances. When you take GABA in a pill, you could synthesize the molecule and just swallow it. But what's it going to do? It's not getting into the brain. The brain, it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So it's not that it does nothing. You do have GABA receptors in other parts of your body that might produce, there is some data that shows that it can produce some sort of relaxing effect in some people. That it versus a placebo. It does seem to do anything. But if you're marketing it as GABA in the brain promotes sleep, because sleep is mostly promoted by GABA as a neurotransmitter. That's the one thing it promotes. It suppresses everything, but promotes sleep. And if you're taking GABA because GABA promotes sleep, and you're selling GABA because you're claiming GABA promotes sleep, you either don't understand the science of how this works, or you're trying to pull a fast one on people because the GABA that they're taking in the pill has nothing to do with sleep-wake regulation. First of all, so just to clear that up. But it can have some sedative properties. So can things like valerian. It's also well studied to have, because valerian works by boosting GABA. Magnesium can also boost GABA levels in the brain. So that's how these things work, is by boosting GABA levels in the brain. Mm-hmm. It does other things too. So all of these, you put them head to head with a placebo, with an insomnia patient, it's not going to beat the placebo. On average. Does it mean it'll never? No. But on average, it doesn't. Time and time and time again. And that's because it's not a treatment. If you put it next to a placebo, will it help people fall asleep faster? Maybe stay asleep a little longer? Feel like their sleep quality is a little better? Sure. Do they work? Yeah. They're not nothing. They do stuff. But I feel like they're overhyped a bit. I'm a proponent for using supplements for all of the things that they do. I know there's some people in the sleep field who just throw them all under the bus as if they're all crap and they're all nonsense and all the claims are wrong. It's no, but there's still science here that is correct, that they do things. But I don't advocate for the things that they don't do. I don't advocate them at least as a first, second, or probably the third line treatment for any kind of sleep disorder, unless it's specifically indicated, like melatonin for circadian rhythm disorders, or iron supplementation for restless legs with low ferritin levels, or something like that, where there is actually science that suggests that this will work. But for insomnia, why go to a supplement when we have behavioral stuff that works, that not only outperforms every supplement on average, but outperforms every prescription sleeping medication there is too. But not everyone has access or can find it or whatever. The thing with supplements are they can be very helpful. I've worked with lots of people who use them to great benefit. There's some of them that are great, but I feel like there's a lack of education around them. I feel like people don't understand. What happens is, they start using supplements and they either swear by it because either it worked or it was a placebo, and there's huge placebo effects in sleep.
Yeah, sure.
Or it doesn't work. And they're like, this is all crap. This is stupid. It's like, nothing works for me. It's like, well, the things that I would have told you weren't going to work didn't work. But and then what happens is they're less willing to try the things that we know will work or that we suspect are more likely to work. Where CBT-I works 80-85% of the time, not 100. But you have supplements that don't treat insomnia. They help make sleep better. That's the paradox. The worse your sleep is, the less they're going to help most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time.
So it takes us full circle to environment, behaviors, mindset. So much of it just goes back to what are we doing? What's our environment like? What are our behaviors? What is our mindset?
Exactly.
And working on those.
Exactly.
So what are you working on lately? What is your next endeavor? I know that you are full-time, all the things, all the time.
Yeah.
If one keeps up with
a couple of
you.
projects that we're working on right now that we're extremely excited about. One is we're studying people in the laboratory where we're studying sort of the neuroscience of what happens to the brain in the middle of the night, where when people are awake between, say, 2 and 5 in the morning, they're more likely to make unhealthy decisions. And I think anyone who's had that experience has had that experience where you blow things out of proportion, you don't make good emotional choices. And the reason why this is important, it's actually, we found that suicide spikes in the middle of the night off the charts, like during those hours. And if we can, and everyone sort of knows that this is a phenomenon, but no one's really understood the neuroscience of this. What actually is happening? And what can we do for people who are going to be awake in the middle of the night, like whether you have insomnia or you're a shift worker? What can we do to blunt whatever this negative effect is? Can we save people from bad choices? Like, no one craves a salad at 2 o'clock in the morning either. And I think it's the same neural mechanisms that we don't make good choices. It's not a sleep deprivation effect, because they could be fine during the day, fine the day before, but it's that middle of the night vulnerability. What's going on, and why is that such a hotbed of bad things happening? And can we do something to prevent that? So we're actually studying that in the laboratory right now.
That is fascinating.
Yeah,
Can't wait
that's
see
one of
what
the
that
projects we're
yields.
doing.
That's awesome. Well, Dr. Grandner, it has been a pleasure and an honor to talk with you. We will stay in touch, hopefully, for round 2, session 2.
You know where to find me.
We could go on for days.
Yeah.
Thank you once again for joining us, Dr. Grandner.
You're very welcome.
Information, inspiration, and opinions are my own and are not intended to be medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider before making any changes to your diet, exercise routine, medical treatment, or if you think you may have a sleep disorder. Conversations I have with subject matter experts are intended to continue our efforts to optimize your sleep for better health, more energy, and improved physical and cognitive performance.